Hey guys, I recently read The Boy in the Striped Pajamas and I created this work of art in response to one of the lines that resonated with me from the story. It was actually the title of chapter 10, which is from a dot to a speck to a blob to a figure to a boy. And I took that statement and I wrote it in reverse and I wrote from a boy to a figure to a blob to dot dot dot. And then I have all of this imagery surrounding that speaks of how these people went from having happy three-dimensional lives to having their identities slowly stripped away from them. I'm going to talk a little bit about how I represented this concept. You can see that I chose to do that through the layering of images. I have these people sticking out from the canvas. They're happy, they're smiling. The armband is behind them, but it's not really a part of the image because they didn't have to go through life wearing the armband, identifying themselves by their religion. Behind them, I have a piece of cardboard with two boys on it. So it's sticking out a little bit from the canvas, but not as much as they are. And I chose to highlight the Star of David that they had to wear because that's all they know. Like they're growing up in a world where they're being persecuted for their religion and they don't really understand it. So that just goes to show the generational divide between these two. And behind them, I have people that are flat against the canvas. And I also put this piece of chicken wire over them to show how they were behind the fence. And here I go even further and I put the image on a transparency so you could see the striped wallpaper popping up underneath them. And you can see in the image they're all wearing the same thing. They all have the headbands. They all have the striped pajamas and a sad expression on their faces. So they're being stripped of their identity here. Next to them, I have a bunch of figures that are emaciated, and over them I have a quote. He told me he used to live in a mansion. Now there isn't much privacy and there isn't much to do. He misses his friends. And that's just illustrating the memories and the past lives that they're holding on to while being subject to the horrors of this concentration camp. I juxtapose these images with a piece of burlap because it's a fabric that I associate with discomfort. It's a very rough fabric, so it speaks to the way their lives were in the concentration camp. I also have this image here with the pile of shoes that belong to all the people who were killed there. I have 6 million scrawled beneath that so that the viewer can understand the scale of how many shoes here were in this image. You can see there's a ladder in the background and it's just showing how high they were piled. I chose to put an image of a person's face, like a close-up, next to that, just so that, again, the viewer can make the connection between the shoes and the real lives that, the people with feelings and ideas and who occupied those shoes. There's a piece of fabric with skeletons, and above that, I'm gonna have to move the camera so you can see, but there's a list of professions speaking to the identities that were lost. I have this moth on the canvas to me it represents death and how death was their only escape from the horrific conditions that they were living in, but it also alludes to the poem about the butterfly in the ghetto. Only this time it's a moth instead of a butterfly. Because it's playing with that, but it's taking it in a different direction. The last image that I have here is a picture of a man walking past a mural, and the man is outlined in blue, and it just shows the disconnect between what happened and how we learn about it. We read about it in history books and novels, but we can never really connect to it because we weren't there living that. So Yeah, right next to that, there's a person in full color. They're wearing a fur coat to represent comfort and luxury, and they're walking a dog. And I have their eyes scratched out like a blindfold because they're oblivious to everything that's going on around them. And that was the case. There were so many people who just didn't realize that this was happening. You read about Bruno and how he was on the train and he was like, well, why are all these people on this train? They're all packed together. They should be on my train. And he just had no idea. And that was the case for a lot of people. That they didn't know what was happening in the concentration camps. Over here, I have a locket, and usually we receive lockets from our families, and they represent our ancestors and family heirlooms. But here I just have an image that represents death because there's a whole generation of people that are not going to be passing down their family's legacy. It's ending. It's tied into the chicken wire fence that I have here. So that was another layer of symbolism that I incorporated in this image. So yeah, we have all this history and we have the knowledge of what had happened, but as I said, we'll never really be able to connect to how truly horrific it was. We hear the number 6 million, but it's like a number that we can't even fathom because it's so big. And this happened on such a mass scale. That's why we still talk about it today, and why we hope that, by helping people learn about it, we could avoid this kind of horrific event happening ever again in our future.